Welcome to Thompson Hine's first event in the Horizon Workroom Metaverse. We are excited to explore this new technology with you today. My name is Elise Hoffer, and I'm a marketing manager at Thompson Hine. Today, we will take you on a journey in this online destination, discussing how this independent virtual economy is being driven by digital currencies and non-fungible tokens, while also learning who's investing in the space and where the Metaverse platform is headed in 2023 and beyond. Before we get started, I want to cover a few housekeeping rules. For those individuals attending with a VR headset, we do ask that you remain seated throughout the entire presentation. And for those attending without a VR headset, you can adjust your screen views by clicking on the three dots in the top right-hand corner of the screen, or by clicking on the white arrows on the boxes on the right-hand side of your screen. These arrows will appear when you hover your mouse over each box. I would suggest keeping your view on the whiteboard, as our speakers will be sharing a few slides today. And you should also have the ability to zoom in on the whiteboard if needed. To avoid unnecessary background noise, we also ask that you keep your line on mute. Please save your questions until the end of the program. You may unmute during the Q&A segment or click the raise hand image to notify the presenters of your question. They will do their best to call on you and address all questions during our time together. Now, I would like to hand it over to Cassandra Borchers, Investment Management Partner and Chair of Thompson Hine's Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Practice Group, to introduce herself and our other panelists.
Elise, thank you very much, and welcome to everyone. We really appreciate you attending our inaugural foray into the Metaverse and the first presentation of its kind from Thompson Hine. So with us today, we have two fantastic speakers, and I want to thank you both in advance, and we'll thank you again at the end. But first, we have Jim Dowd, who's the CEO of North Capital. And Jim, if you could please join us. Would you like to come on up front? And then you can give a little bit of a background about yourself and North Capital.
Great. Thank you. Let me move over here.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Cassandra. Appreciate the invitation to be here, and this is my first trip to the Metaverse, so I look forward to the discussion today. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of North Capital. We are a financial technology firm and registered broker-dealer focused on improving the life cycle of private securities from origination to distribution, secondary trading, and custody. And we've been actively involved in watching the evolution of blockchain technology and how it's beginning to kind of affect securities markets and in particular some of the things happening in the Metaverse. So super excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you. And next we have Skyler Steinke. Skyler is a digital asset consultant currently. Skyler, can you join us up at the whiteboard, please?
Absolutely.
I think Elise had also mentioned this is a Horizon Workroom owned and sponsored by Meta, for those who are not aware. A lot of functionality. Skyler.
Yes, thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here. A little bit about myself. As Cassandra mentioned, I'm a digital asset consultant. I've been my background's been in the financial services space, specifically in fund administration, fund services, helping managers launch both public and private products. And with that, got into digital assets back in 2015, and just really trying to understand what my clients were going through and how to understand what they were looking at, both from an investment perspective and actually just understanding the ecosystem. Kind of went down the rabbit hole. Took a few classes at MIT, just understanding kind of where things are going. And with that, obviously DeFi, the Metaverse, and all these exciting topics have come in full force for all of us. And yeah, definitely excited to be part of the conversation today.
So important. Thank you both again. So we're going to kick this off by talking about what is the Metaverse. For starters, there's currently not just one Metaverse, nor will there potentially ever be, but it's not a single universe. It's an online location that meshes virtual reality, augmented reality, real-life principles. There are several out there already, and more are expected to crop up. It's a fusion of that, physical and virtual reality, a lot of different potential capabilities. it encompasses, could encompass the entire social, economic, work structure. A lot of a variety of applications are potentially being planned for the metaverse. And Skyler, since you have traveled a lot, spoken and attended conferences all over the world, so I'd like to hear from you. What are you most excited about in the metaverse, and what can we be expecting to come down the line?
Yeah, it's definitely a very exciting space. Obviously, very early stages, right? It's very early in what people are doing. They're dipping their toes in the water, whether it be just creating a virtual office in the metaverse on various platforms. But yeah, there's a lot of different real-world applications that are very exciting. One being, industrial supply chain applications where people are building different things. One example, they're creating, as an example, BMW created a digital twin of their manufacturer plant in Bavaria before they actually broke ground the real world location as far as that goes. So trying to testing different things before they actually deploy it in the real world environment, which is very exciting. Other things like healthcare, surgery, financial services, banking. People are creating offices in the metaverse to service the digital native customers that are coming into the space, along with existing customers to help with customer service issues and things like that. Along with in the fund services space, creating unique experiences with clients, with investors, all different types of things that are coming in full force, right? So it's exciting to see where things are going, and there's a lot of real world applications that are really going to change how we interact and do business.
That's fantastic. And Jim, I know you have a lot of clients in the financial services space. What are you hearing from your clients, and what are they really focusing on at this point?
Well, so far, most of our interaction with clients about the metaverse has been around some of the payment rails and tokens and different forms of currency and exchange that can be utilized in the metaverse. Obviously, there's kind of an intersection between blockchain technology and kind of this whole idea of these alternative metaverses. And so because of that, we've had clients who are interested in trying to either issue payment mechanisms or tokens, and because all of these types of assets exist in the real world as well, there are oftentimes securities law issues and regulatory considerations that they're looking for help and support in dealing with.
Absolutely, and I think that's a topic for a whole nother webinar. All of the regulatory issues and concerns, they certainly don't go away just because you've shifted into the metaverse. So this is a representation of what we've been talking about. I think a lot of people's expectation is that the metaverse will be in use in ways we probably can't even comprehend right now. We're just at the beginning of this, whether it's JP Morgan that's already set up some real estate and a branch or some availability in Decentraland. There's a strictly metaverse startup bank, from what I understand. So a lot of things tied to entertainment. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about gaming. I think gaming really was at the forefront of this entire push into the metaverse. My children didn't play Fortnite, but I know that's a big one that's been around for quite a while now.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So, I mean, what are your thoughts with respect to Skyler? What are your thoughts with respect to big picture concerns? I mean, obviously, that's going to take some time for all of this to shake out, but in terms of what's driving this, is it is it just the advancements of the technology at this time? Is it this younger generation that's more immersive and interactive? Did the pandemic have anything to do with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a little bit of everything, right? Obviously, being in a remote environment for a number of years now with the pandemic, along with younger generations used to technology, used to interacting with various platforms and feel comfortable in that environment. I think everyone else trying to find a way to kind of get involved and immerse themselves in what this looks like and what it will look like down the road, right? I think there's many different platforms out there. We don't know which one's going to win, or it's going to be the one to be going forward, right? So I think it's definitely a big opportunity for many just to see what's going to happen here, and I would definitely, you see many different players getting involved just to see what it looks like for their specific business and what's the use case going forward.
Right, and since we're talking about use case, Jim, I think you had mentioned NFTs. So this entire thing is built around the blockchain. NFTs have been a real force in the metaverse, and even going back a couple of years, there was one group that was saying they were just use cases, right, for what's to come next. Obviously, the art world is tied in closely to NFTs, but there's a lot of different applications. And on that front, what are you hearing or seeing with respect to your clients? We're kind of in this, quote unquote, crypto winter. There's been some regulatory issues with NFTs. So what can we expect?
Well, I think it's at this stage it's all very experimental, right? So I think that the early use cases have been just that, sort of trying to find a kind of a business use case and application, and so I think it will evolve over time. And I can't say how it will evolve, but definitely there's connectivity around or issues around art and kind of virtual representations, which obviously everything in the metaverse is virtual and is a representation, and so that kind of dovetails nicely with what happens with NFTs, where you can have sort of digital art and digital representation, or you can have representation of real world assets, and I think that sort of will lead to some interesting kind of new challenges on the legal front and on the operational front as well, as to how things interact between the metaverse and the real world.
Mm-hmm. And access, of course. So there's a lot of funding and a lot of money that's going into the metaverse already. Billions of dollars in building out the metaverse, trillions of dollars projected to be spent in the metaverse in the very near future. We've put up a couple of the notable players in the metaverse. A lot of these are large tech companies, as you would expect. I think we've talked about there's a broader audience with respect to that. And Microsoft just had an interesting announcement yesterday or the day before. Skyler, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, they kind of announced that they were stepping back from their metaverse team to kind of see what's going to happen. I think their thought was, based on the article that I read, was that they can jump in at any time, given they are Microsoft and have a good leg up in technology. But that was an interesting move for them. But definitely, and then on the other side of that, you see BlackRock. I think it was today or yesterday. Said, hey, we're in on the metaverse. We find an opportunity, just more of a technology picks and shovels play, to build out new glasses and components that are needed for this infrastructure, right? So it's interesting. Everybody's trying to take a look at what makes sense for them and their business, and see what the trajectory is, what the timing is to get it now versus later.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think that particular segment of Microsoft was developed to work with particular clients on software so that they could themselves enter the metaverse. So, on hold for now with the tech layoffs, that's not entirely surprising. And the hardware piece of it is something as well. I mean, the hardware kind of brings us back to the privacy, cybersecurity compliance concerns. Jim, I think you had looked into this or done some work around it, because there's a lot stored on that VR headset.
Sure. And privacy and data security are significant issues regardless. I mean, we're still kind of struggling with the fact that there are different privacy requirements in different countries and different regions, and not to mention state regulations. California has some particularly onerous and kind of state-specific regulations. So if you're doing business in California, you have to worry about issues and disclosures that you might not need to worry about in certain other locations. And if you kind of extrapolate that to now kind of virtual locations, how will those kind of work together, from a privacy standpoint? If you're physically located in California, but you're, actually conducting activity in the metaverse, how does that tie in, for instance? And then the security issue, I think, is a big one, because to your point, if a lot of the information is stored, in the headset, and someone can put that headset on and then potentially, go away with that information, then that's a kind of a new attack vector for bad actors. And I'm sure we'll see that in the future, and start to hear cases of information being taken or data being kind of hijacked.
Yeah, absolutely. No shortage of cybersecurity issues around blockchain or any of these new technology developments. And then the other thing I guess I should mention is, ETFs have come into the space. So Skyler and I have both done a lot of work in the registered fund space. And I think the stat I saw was that, in a year and a half, between June of 2021 and December of 2020, there were 35 metaverse-focused ETFs that came out in the marketplace. And of course, each one of those is going to have their own strategy, which will be described in the registration statement, their offering materials, their own strategies and focus. But I mean, I think that speaks to some of the money that's being poured into this space and some of the interest. Skyler, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's definitely a great point, Cassandra. I think, when I speak to many different investment advisors about, metaverse, and some have some knowledge, and some are like, we see the opportunity, we just don't know where. So I think the ETF is definitely a natural fit for them. They don't know who's going to win, right? So, but they want to be in the game. So the opportunity, with all the money pouring in, they want to at least have some type of allocation to the underlying technology companies that represent the current metaverse today.
Yep. I think there's probably more on the horizon, I would guess. Okay. As you can see, I'm not as savvy with this slide flipping as I need to be. There we go. Let me clear off just a couple of these. Oh, here we go. What's coming? Let's talk about that next. So, I mean, in some respects, Microsoft is really, they've made a big commitment, and there's a big purchase on the horizon still, I believe. So I included a quote in here about their vision, talking about, entertainment and content, commerce flowing freely in and amongst various metaverses. One of the goals I think that most speak to is interoperability and transfers from one digital space to another. Crypto payments, of course, Bitcoin I think is very firmly established. The Ethereum blockchain, which most of this is built upon, very clearly established. And then you've got all of those cryptocurrencies out there that will certainly serve a function in the metaverse. ETFs, establishing ownership, non-exclusive rights, a unique copy of a digital object. There are, I think in Decentraland, there are groups that have displayed their art, and you can just really go in and browse around and look at other people's NFT art. And then the concept of a universal digital identity is cropping up, which will need to be developed. And with all of this, I'm starting with Bitcoin and the blockchain, I think one of the goals, the ultimate goals, is decentralization. That seems to be the holy grail of the blockchain. So decentralized blockchain-based metaverses with a fully autonomous virtual economy, wow, that's a lot. So I know it's going to take a while to get there, but Jim, what are your thoughts on that? And do you think that's going to be achievable?
Well, I think we'll definitely see sort of incremental steps, and some of these use cases are kind of would be a benefit in the real world as well as in the virtual world. So there's been a lot of talk about universal digital identity for years, but that sort of raises privacy concerns, and is that universal identity sort of managed by the government, or is it managed by private organizations? And, there are pros and cons to both approaches from a privacy and security standpoint, but there are clearly benefits and I would say it's like more interoperability than it is decentralization. I personally believe that the whole decentralization thesis is a little bit kind of overstated in terms of the value, but I do see huge value in having interoperability in the same way that, when Netscape, I'm old enough to remember, when Netscape came on the scene with the internet, and it really was transformative because that was the first time that you had sort of an open source piece of technology where you could go kind of all over the internet across a broad range of networks and see information. And I can see something similar developing, in this sort of more immersive world as well.
That's it. Yep, I agree. And Skyler, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different opportunities and to Jim's point, definitely real world applications for a lot of this stuff too. It's going to take a lot of time to kind of figure out as people dip their toes in the water what makes sense. And to the point of, interoperability and, just talking about the impetus of gaming, buying something, if you have children, they're buying something in one game, being able to take that as ownership and put it into another game, which is very exciting, right? So that's just one simple application that can, even thinking about the internet itself and different browsers that we use, we really don't care anymore, whether it's, one browser versus another. We can still operate in different sides of the equation, not an issue. So yeah, it's exciting to see where this is going to go, and I think it will take time to develop, but definitely exciting to see.
Okay, I wanted to also take a few minutes to talk about some big headlines in the news. One of the ones that we had been following is the Hermès bag dispute with Mason Rothschild, who was the artist who created those Meta Birkin bags. And just last week, a New York jury came back and said that he, there was a fine awarded to Birkin based upon the fact that he did impose upon and infringe on their trademark property rights that they have in the real world already, and those continue into the metaverse. I know he was trying to argue, First Amendment rights, a fair use case. Jim, I think you had some experience, not this time, something sort of similar, and maybe you can talk to us about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, so it was kind of in the 2D world with some internet content. We had put online a piece of a fairly kind of evergreen report that Vanguard had produced, and we obtained their permission to post it online and make it downloadable. We thought it was a good general piece of of research that our clients would appreciate. And at some point, several years after we had done this, we actually were contacted by an intellectual property attorney alleging violation of IP. And, we really had no idea what it was because, of course, we'd obtained permission from Vanguard. But apparently within the piece, like buried within the piece, so in the PDF document that was posted on the website, there was a photo that was a stock photo that had been licensed by Vanguard, but it was licensed with a specific end date. And of course, the end date came and went, and Vanguard had they had no obligation to notify us, but we didn't know that, in fact, this license had expired, and so we had to, take down the piece of research because we didn't have an ongoing right to use a photo that was a part of the marketing piece. So if you think about, kind of the plaintiff's bar, kind of looking for IP violations in sort of the 2D world, imagine the opportunities, in the metaverse where right. Literally we're kind of looking around at all of these buildings and, various things. And I mean, there could be all sorts of potential IP violations down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Everything seems to be magnified a bit in the metaverse. You've got an additional layer. And stock photos, I know that's coming up already a lot with AI, which is the new darling. The next one we were just mentioning, we talked about Microsoft. They've been in the news a lot. And prior to that, they had announced their purchase of Activision Blizzard to create their own metaverse platform for over $68 billion. So I haven't heard that they've moved off of that just yet. So they still seem like they're going to be dedicated to the space, and they still have it. They even said in the press release they do view a future in the metaverse still. And then the last item, once again, the rapidly growing universe of metaverse ETFs, and a lot constantly going on in the markets, obviously, with respect to both new companies popping up and existing companies who have decided to expand and dip their toe into this new immersive technology to see what it can mean for them and for their customers. So with that, I wanted to take questions. If anyone has a question, you can either unmute yourself and ask the question, or if you raise your hand, if you click something in the chat, I think that will raise your hand, and then we can call on you specifically. Otherwise, just feel free to dive in. Yes, Ricky.
Hey everyone, this is not necessarily a question, but I thought it would be an interesting thing to add to the conversation. So my name is Ricky, for those folks that don't know me, hello. We run a virtual reality production studio in Austin, Texas. I've been working with Thompson Hine a little bit in kind of on their metaverse strategy. Thanks for having us today. So we had a really interesting experience this week where we met with a gentleman from LA who has been in the production world for a long time, worked on lots of big fancy features and movies that I'm sure all of us have sat in the theater and watched at some point. And what he is creating, which I thought was really interesting, is a hands-on film school inside of the metaverse. And he's from someone who went to a film school many years ago. It was just a really interesting use case for this technology that where you have these new tools, like we were talking about the Mandalorian, right? If anyone's familiar with that piece, they're using really expensive technology to make those new films or those new experiences. And he was able to, from someone as a student, when you're in film school or, law school or whatever it is, you don't always have access to that level of technology, right? And so it was really interesting that myself, my creative director, got kind of a behind the scenes look at this technology. And we were able to go in and actually play with $1 million, piece of technology, this whole LED wall and green screen, and play with it and really, pick up cameras, and we were shooting scenes, and it was an absolutely fascinating experience. And I just thought I'd bring that up as you're thinking about everything from IP protection and these different things. I mean, we were in there playing with, if you're familiar, Red is a brand of high-end camera used to film a lot of TV shows and stuff nowadays, and we were able to go in and use a real Red, quote unquote, right, a real Red digital camera and set up shots, and they had recreated the Seinfeld set as another experience, and this wasn't a public demo where we got kind of a private demo of this, but I started to immediately think about, well, they recreated a likeness of the Seinfeld set. Well, where does that line get drawn, right? And we were using a quote unquote Red camera. And well, is that okay? Where do those lines get drawn from a legal and protection perspective? And so not only is it an interesting use case of the technology, but it obviously, to your point, I think, Cassandra, there's a lot of gray areas in this space, and we see it all the time working with clients. We're doing something right now that a company that's building an augmented reality tool that allows you to see fencing in your backyard. So you want to replace the fence in your backyard, and it's like, well, maybe I want cedar or maybe I want pine. Well, what does that look like? And so we're developing an experience for them where they can actually use just an iPad, and using digital augmented reality technology, you can see these different types of fencing in your backyard. Well, the question came up, this company is helping build, or they're building a technology product for other, fence contracting firms who buy their products at Home Depot. Well, they want to use images from the Home Depot website as a reference to build these digital representations of this fence. Again, where we had a conversation internally about that of where does the legal line get drawn on that, right? Who's responsible? Is that recreating a white vinyl fence that's on Home Depot's website in the metaverse? Is, do we need Home Depot's permission to do that, or the company that sells them their fencing? So lots of interesting questions and lots of different interesting use cases that exist here in this space, and we're on the front lines. And so yeah, just some more food for thought, just adding some context to the conversation from kind of a boots on the ground perspective.
Yes, I mean there are so many issues at play. Bo, I think, raised his hand. You can go ahead, Bo.
Thanks, Cassandra. I'm just wondering, have you or any of your fellow attorneys heard how states are handling the attorney-client relationship in the metaverse, right? Because that tends to be kind of geographically specific, but how does that apply in something virtual?
I do not know the answer to that. I suspect it's going to be dealt with state by state. One of the things that we had talked about, and our first foray is presenting information and content and maybe doing those types of things in the metaverse. But when you talk about actually setting up a law firm, which there are a few who have set up space in the metaverse, my understanding is they've really just set up the space. I don't know if they're actually giving advice from that space. I mean, you need to be very careful about your engagement letter, I think, for starters. Very careful about how you word things. But it is fascinating. There's really a lot to touch on. And Skyler had mentioned about the digital twin. Because I'm head of the blockchain cryptocurrency space, I've been going around to different practice groups within our firm, talking about the group, which is a multidisciplinary group. And when I met with the construction practice group, they could see a lot of really practical applications that would be very, very beneficial, and safer, right? So you can deal with some issues prior to building a building or a plant. And then the question becomes, with a lot of this, well, who has the money? Who makes that investment? Who owns it once you make the investment? And how do you recoup your cost and protect your own intellectual property and other rights?
That's a great point. Just another thing to add on that, the recent article that was on Saudi Arabia, they just opened their first virtual shopping mall. And I was having a conversation with a business owner who was trying to figure out, he was a franchisee, what the franchise rights would be based on this virtual reality situation, because it's based on territory, right, and geographic location.
Right.
So how does that cover his contract, and what does that look like going forward? So both to your point and to Cassandra, these are gray areas that we have to figure out, right? We don't know the answers to at this point.
I think there's a long road ahead. Right now it's a little bit of the Wild West and people testing boundaries.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions? Well, I can't thank you all enough for joining us, and thank you, Skyler and Jim, for actually presenting with me. We really appreciate your expertise and input, and I couldn't have done this without you, so thank you. I also want to call out Jeff Costas, who is in our IT group here at Thompson Hine and trained all of us and helped us get into the metaverse and start playing around with it. So thank you, Jeff, for all your support and time and effort, and everyone else at the Thompson Hine team.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.